Lerner.
Welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast with your host, Dr. Randy Cook.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Prescription for Success podcast. I'm Dr. Randy Cook, and I'll be your host for the program. We'll get into today's interview in just a moment, but first I want to take an opportunity to remind everyone that our podcast is sponsored by MD Coaches, a company dedicated to empowering physicians to realize a greater potential and to achieve a greater level of satisfaction in their chosen fields. You can find MD Coaches on the web at mymdcoaches.com. Well, my interview guest today is Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte, who is Vice President for Research at Tulane University Medical Center. In addition to his administrative and clinical research duties, he's also an attending pediatrician at Tulane University Medical Center, as well as at Children's Hospital of New Orleans. He has a remarkable story of growing up under the guidance of working-class parents in Italy. They had no formal education, and with no guidance other than his own ambition, he was admitted to the medical university in Rome, where he was a magna cum laude graduate. The story gets really interesting at that point when he suddenly abandoned his plans to become a surgeon and set his ambition on pediatrics. That decision led him to a lengthy period of laboratory research before he finally found a home combining clinical practice with research and institutional leadership. It's a really inspiring story, so now let's hear that interview with Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte. And I'm delighted to be talking today with Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte from Tulane University School of Medicine in New Orleans. Looking forward to our conversation. Giovanni, thank you so much for joining us, and welcome to Prescription for Success.
Thank you, Randy. Thank you for having me.
And really looking forward to hearing your story. We talk to people from all walks of life and all different circumstances, but I have to tell you, Giovanni, the ones that fascinate me the most are those people who make a decision early in life to uproot themselves and leave a language and a culture that they're fully familiar with and move into something entirely different, which is exactly what you did. And I'm going to be very interested in hearing that story. But to get us started, as we always do, I would like to hear a little bit about your early influences. How did you come to be interested in medicine, and where did those influences come from?
So, it's at the same time simple story and complex.
I bet.
I was not supposed to. I'm the first graduate, to my knowledge, on both sides of the family. And both my mother and my father, they were not able to go beyond, I think, 10th grade. My mother actually 5th grade. I was born in the deep south of Italy, and both my mother and my father went through the war. So at the end of the war in Europe, there was pretty much nothing left. Actually, only recently, just a few years ago, when I started lecturing extensively around Europe, I realized the level of destruction that was left behind by the Second World War. So my father was born in 1933 and my mother in 1940. My mother, she survived pretty much the day after she was born. A bomb fell literally within a block from where she was.
Wow.
So the bottom line of this is that those were generations that couldn't go to school. for, first of all, because there were no schools. After the war, there were simply no schools left in Italy, and as well as several other European countries. In the case of my mother, at the time was not considered very kosher for girls to be educated, because that will reduce their
that was
chances.
really different back then, wasn't it?
Yeah, that will reduce their chances of finding a husband, which was the fundamental measure of success at the time. So pretty much my mother and my father, both of them, they were not able to write, and they were not virtually able to read. My mother still signs documents with something a little bit more than an X. And they never spoke actually Italian, because they were speaking the dialect. So they never really spoke Italian correctly. And they grew up in the 60s in Sicily, and most of my friends were actually fishermen, and very few of my friends actually went to school. I don't know why I liked school, and I don't know why I was actually pretty good in school, and I was the valedictorian. I graduated with the highest marks and so forth.
Yeah, you have a really impressive academic record, and I want to ask you a little bit more about this. And it sounds like, in terms of family or other close acquaintances of the family, if I'm understanding you correctly, there was not really a highly educated role model anywhere. This was just something that you gravitated to. Have I got that right?
Correct. I mean, I was attracted to study because, for some very bizarre and mysterious reasons, I really had fun reading. I mean, I was literally devouring books. I was reading virtually throughout if I were awake, I would be reading, and I was fascinated by books. I was, I don't know, I really had a lot of fun doing it, and so again, mysterious, because so I became fascinated, particularly with literature, particularly with Latin literature, Greek literature, history. I was literally scavenging books.
That's really fascinating. And how old were you when you began to learn English?
Well, I thought that I started learning English when I was in Italy, but the truth of the matter is, as soon as I arrived in the United States, I realized that I had very little to do with English. So
well put.
Yeah, I mean, my true English learning system was to watch TV every minute that I could. So I would just spend hours watching
My
TV,
goodness.
but not because I had the interest in what they were saying, but just to learn how to speak English. And
that's really interesting.
And then, writing, the first thing I did in English was to learn science, and I was at UCSF at University of California, San Francisco. And I was able pretty soon to write a decent paper. The problem was when I decided that, because I was already a physician in Europe, and at a certain point I had the opportunity to do a second residency in pediatrics at UCSF, and that was when I realized that still I didn't speak English, because I could grasp maybe 10% of what was of a normal discussion in the hospital.
Really?
Yeah. Which created
My goodness.
huge problems, because I had to really learn the live English while I was taking care of patients, which in the first months was pretty disastrous.
And well, now let me back you up. Let me back you up just a moment, and I really apologize for the interruption, but this is such a fascinating story. So, at the time that you finished what we would consider to be the equivalent of high school, when you were in Italy, you made a decision to proceed with higher education. Now, was that the point where you had made the decision that you were going to go to medical school right after high school?
Look, that is one of the most mysterious parts of the story, because I had no interest in medicine whatsoever. What happened was that I was the valedictorian. I was by far my father sent me to not only to a boarding school. I guess he didn't trust me very much. So not only sent me to a boarding school, but he sent me to a Catholic boarding school run by priests. And it was a very, very, very hard, very tough school. And what can I say? I love to learn. I love to study, and
so there were high academic expectations, and it sounds like you just fit right in. Is that right?
Yeah, but not because I really wanted. Just actually, as a matter of fact, the only thing I really cared about was soccer, and I became actually a professional soccer player. In that they were paying me. That was really the only thing I was interested in. But in the meantime, I was learning. And
you and Pavarotti were both failed soccer players. You know.
Well, I was a little bit thinner than him, but and probably better at soccer, not at singing. But what happens really is that at least in the Italy of the 70s, 80s, if you were very good in school and you had talent and in school, you had only three options. The first option was to become a lawyer. And at the time, I was pretty convinced that to be a good lawyer, you have to be a very good liar. And occasionally, I still believe that. But now I have to change my mind because at least one of my daughters probably is going to become a lawyer.
Oh, that's great.
And so I've never been very good at lying. Second, engineering, and I was very, very good at anything that had to do with literature, art, classics, and so on. So I hated mathematics with a vengeance. And so I was not very attracted by things that will be fundamentally mathematical. And so the last option by default was medicine. And so that's what, it was literally and exclusively a decision by default.
So a process of elimination. That's really
a process of elimination. I mean, I had those three options. All the others, business school is not considered as a particular element or the three top aspiration for anybody who's good in school, at least at the time. And so I had to pick among those three, and I picked the one that was least. I had the least adversity against.
Yeah. Well, now that's opens up an interesting area of conversation, I think, and that is. Certainly, the study of medicine is not, I don't think anybody would consider it to be highly mathematical from the engineering or architectural standpoint of something or of that nature, but still, it's very factual discipline as opposed to the letters, if you will, literature and the arts and that sort of thing.
But there is a lot of truth in when people say that medicine is an art and not a science. I continue romantically to believe that.
Yeah. But so once you were there, did you feel comfortable? Did you feel like you'd made the right decision early on, or did you wonder from time to time? Okay. So
absolutely. It's either philosophy or religion. And I think that somebody up there has been driving me in the most important decisions in my life. And, I fell into medicine really without thinking about it too much. And it turned out to be one of the best decisions in my life. And the same thing happened when totally serendipitously I got into pediatrics. I had absolutely nothing to do with pediatrics. I was supposed to become a surgeon. And in fact, in Italy, it's not very easy to get into surgical, general surgery residencies. And I got into it. And I really wanted. I mean, I had absolutely no interest outside of surgery. I felt that was my life. The problem is, in order to graduate as an MD, you have to prepare a thesis. And I did prepare a thesis. I worked a lot, day and night on it. And I also spent a substantial amount of money, which I didn't have at the time, to prepare a very exhaustive photographic documentation of the staplers that we had just received from the United States for abdominal surgery. And my mentor at the time told me that he really loved the work, and he asked me to provide him with a separate set of pictures, which I really didn't understand why I needed a separate set of pictures, but you don't say no to your mentor. And so I spent an additional amount of money, corresponding approximately to the money I needed to eat for a month.
My goodness.
To get them the pictures, and he actually was in a hurry to get them. And then I forgot about it. I graduated as an MD. I accessed residency in surgery. But then I was spending lots of nights in the OR to watch surgeries. And
so you were already in your surgery residency at this point?
Yeah, pretty much. I mean, there is a couple of months that between the end of med school and entrance into the internship, and I was in that phase. I was waiting for the beginning, formal, official beginning of the internship, but I was still spending a lot of time in the OR.
Okay.
And nothing. I was one morning been all night in the OR, and I decided to rest a little bit in the doctor lounge, and there were a bunch of journals on the table there, and I started going through the pages of one, and serendipitously, despite I was half asleep, I noticed that there were pictures that were very familiar to me. And so I found out the reason why my mentor wanted a new set of pictures, which was that he published a paper. The paper was identical to my thesis, and the pictures were the pictures that I had to pay, despite he was coming from one of the richest families in Rome. And I didn't take it very well. So that day I told them in plain Italian what I thought about them, and that was the official end of my future career in surgery. And across the street was the pediatric clinic. My professor of pediatrics was very fond of me. He really loved my work, and that promised me that if I would enter the residency in pediatrics, that he would at a certain point send me to the United States, which happened 2 years later. And
that is an incredible story. Now, and I want to stop you there just a moment for some more details, if you will. Now, I think anybody could understand the feeling of realizing that you've been plagiarized. And when you confronted this very lofty professor, Did you understand at that time, in the midst of your anger, that you were probably closing a door that you'd never be able to reopen? Yeah, and never thought twice about it, right?
I will not do it today, probably, but at the time I was in my 20s, and
Sure.
and I still believed in that things should be done ethically. I still do, but I will control my reactions. But at the time, basically, the simple concept. He put the 8 names on that paper, but he didn't put the name of the one that actually wrote it. And and so basically, it's I think it's also a metaphor what happened to me, because again, the academic system at the time, and in my opinion still today in Italy, was extremely corrupted. Yeah. And I was nobody coming from the South. And I was not the son of a big professor. My family was not involved in politics, so I didn't have any relevant feature to make a strong academic career in Italy, because those are the only elements that are important. And so basically, he thought that probably that paper was wasted on me, and he found a better use to. But I felt a little different, and in turn, basically, he gave me a great present, in that probably I will not be in the United States today if he wouldn't have done something so dirty.
And let me ask you this, and I really apologize for interrupting, but I'm curious. Did that? You mentioned that part of the agreement that you made with your pediatrics preceptor was that he would arrange for you to do more training in the U.S.
Right.
Was that important because that you realized that it would be difficult for you to remain in the system in Italy because of this disagreement that you had with a very highly placed professor, or did that enter into it at all?
Well, yes. First of all, at the time, the United States were the mecca of high-end medicine and science, and even more than today, I would say. So I wanted to come to the United States because I wanted to be the best possible doctor that I
So that
could
was
be.
Already a bit of a dream for you before this ever happened.
Yes.
I see.
But also, in Italy, basically, everything it's easy for you if you are the son of the right person or the daughter of the right person, and if you have connections, and if you have a network of connections that basically allows you to access certain positions. Otherwise, your chances are less than zero. And to date, from what I hear from my friends, still there. There's not that much different. But I was not coming from a dynasty of academic doctors, and nor I had, I was coming from a relatively not poor, but certainly mid-class family without significant connections to the political world. And so without that, you have no chance of making a career, except that you can go maybe in private practice or in primary care. But certainly you're not going to access the heights of academic life. And instead, that's exactly what I wanted to do. And I felt that perhaps in the United States, my dreams will come true.
That's really quite a story. And just a little bit, we got so much territory to cover here, but I am interested in your recollection of what life was like as a pediatrics resident in Italy. Did you feel like you were going to be able to find an area that would really interest you and give you an interest to excel? I mean, it's a big jump from surgery to pediatrics. So what was
Yeah.
your state of mind at
And
that time?
again, was a serendipitous way that somebody up there basically directed my life because still today I still maintain clinical activities, and every time I see one of my pediatric patients, I feel that it's the best thing that ever happened to me. I don't think I would still be doing medicine if I wouldn't take care of children. And the pediatric pulmonary was again serendipitous because in Italy there are no formal subspecialties, or at least there were not at the time. I don't think still, but so basically your subspecialty was determined by the director of the clinic that you were affiliated with, and this professor that basically took me under his a little bit under his wing was a pediatric pulmonologist, and that's the reason I became a pediatric pulmonologist. Then when I came to the United States, first I had to finish my residency in general pediatrics, but because my interest was already determined to be into respiratory diseases, I also did a formal fellowship in pediatric pulmonary, and that's the reason I'm a pediatric pulmonologist today.
So let's take just a short break for a minute or two. I want to take a moment to talk to you about a new sponsor that we have here on Prescription for Success. Physician Outlook is a new magazine platform built for physicians and by physicians, and it's designed to showcase unique physician talents. Sometimes it might be clinical talents, but mostly it's about the intersection between clinical and non-clinical talents, whether it be writing or painting or cooking, or maybe even making a political statement in front of a state and local governing body, or even at the nation's capital, and dozens of other things. It's available online and in print. It's visually stunning on all of its platforms. I promise it's really unique in terms of physician lifestyle magazines. I think you'll really enjoy it. We think it's just the thing to fill your prescription for success. And like the Prescription for Success podcast, Physician Outlook magazine amplifies the voice of any doctor who has something to say, and also uniquely engages patients who still believe in physician-led, team-based care. And Prescription for Success listeners can get $20 off an annual subscription fee by visiting rxforsuccesspodcast.com/Physician Outlook. And now let's get back to today's interview. And so we've arrived at another point, which I think is really important to talk about, and you've alluded to it before, and that is you left your native country, you moved to a different continent in the midst of a totally different culture, a totally different language, which you've already said your familiarity with English was limited at best. And here you are at one of the most prestigious medical universities on the planet, University of California, San Francisco. Were you ever bewildered? Did you ever have moments that you thought, my goodness, how am I going to do this? Or was it just get up one day at a time and do what had to be done? What was your mindset?
No, because again, in the United States, it's not that they were waiting for me. I was literally at the bottom of the pole there. I mean, actually several feet under. But first of all, the fellowship that I started with was a research fellowship. So, and I had absolutely no clue. I have never held a pipetter in my life. I felt quite actually diminished. I was a clinical physician, very proud of it in Europe, and here I'm in the United States working with rats. So, and I had to even explain to my father what the heck I was doing in the United States working with rats. But with time, I learned how to do research, and research is something addictive. And And eventually I got hooked to it. And to this date, I don't see my life without doing scientific research. But it was a process. But the good thing was that despite I was at the very bottom of the pyramid, I was still treated with some respect.
Well, I wanted to ask you about that. I wonder how you were received by the people that you were working with, the people that would be your mentors. Did they give you the impression that they were happy to work with you? Did you ever feel like you were in the way? This is really a fascinating story. So tell us more.
So, the fellows are, at least at the time, I think more at the time than it is today, but where we were basically mules. We were there in the lab to do the research for these big professors. But again, you see, it's not that life was easier in the United States for me, but at least there was a potential light at the end of the tunnel. So there was at least that minuscule chance that if I would work day and night, eventually I could perhaps succeed in some way in doing the things I wanted to do. And which in Italy did not exist. In Italy, basically, if you do not belong to a certain network of power, you can do actually the smarter you are, the better you are, the more brilliant you are, the more they are afraid of you, and they're going to try to eliminate you as a virus. In the United States, first of all, I was mesmerized by working with people that the same people that wrote the books that I was reading in Italy. I was lucky to be at UCSF. I had, at the time, one of the most important textbooks in pediatrics was the Rudolph and Hoffman. I happened to actually work directly with them, with David Rudolph and Julian Hoffman. And although my primary mentor was an adult pulmonologist, but I was doing exciting work, and little by little, I think it's not that they particularly loved my work, but I was working day and night, and I was producing papers at the speed of light, and that was good for the labs. And so what happened was that I went to the United States with a scholarship that was supposed to last 6 months. I made the money last for a year. And by the time that basically the year was over and I completely ran out of money, and I walked into the office of my mentor and said, listen, I have to go back. And he asked me, are you crazy? I said, well, I don't need to eat much, but I need to eat something. And finally he realized that he had to pay me, not much. I mean, my first salary was like $1,000 a month, something like that, in San Francisco.
Wow.
But he decided to pay me because they were getting ready to send out a PPG, a large center grant. And I was the one doing an important piece of that PPG. And so he felt that $1,000 was worth it to be spent a month for a grant that, he will get millions of dollars in return.
Sounds reasonable to me.
Sounds reasonable. And and that was literally my first contract. And the second thing, again, serendipity. That was the year that I think was George Bush Sr. became president. The elections, there was a ballot in California, was called, I think, Proposition 99, and would increase taxes on the tobacco smoke by 25 cents a pack of cigarettes. And that money went into research. And one day my mentor basically calls me and says, listen, you need to, I think you have good research. You're doing good research and you can write a grant. And I look at him and I said, are you kidding me? And he's asked me why. I said, I just came back from the cafeteria. Literally every table of the cafeteria, there was somebody writing a grant because it was such a unique opportunity. I said there is not a chance that I can get it. And
so
and
you've been in the U.S. how long when this happened?
Couple of years, I will say.
Okay.
2 years to 3 years. 2 years.
Learning English, watching television.
Right.
And now you're being asked to write a grant.
That's all I had in my apartment. I didn't have much. I had a sofa bed and a TV. That was in one room.
And you're being asked to write a grant.
Yeah.
And what a story! This gets better and better. So go ahead.
I think again I'm going to write a book on this. But believe it or not, they gave 20 grants that year, and the number 25 was mine. And that changed everything, because the next day they gave me a lab. I became a faculty member. I was an instructor. Life was good.
Yeah, I bet.
And then the next step was that. So this was, I think, a 3-year grant, and the last year. See, I had always lived with the idea that I will go back to Italy. But at the same time, there was no work for me in Italy.
Yeah,
I spoke several times.
I'm glad you came to that, because I was wondering if your aim was to stay in this country.
Well,
but at that point, not really, huh?
No, I mean, was not in among the things that I could even consider. But towards the end of my fellowship, I had this meeting in Boston with my original mentor, the one from Italy, who was there for a conference. And I said, listen, I think I'm coming back to Italy. He wanted me to, of course, because I was doing pretty good research.
Yeah, I bet he did.
And I said, well, so you're going to give me a job? And he looked at me and said, are you kidding me? And I said, explain this to me. I mean, my family is not even in Rome. My family is in Sicily. They don't have money. Explain to me, how am I supposed to live in Rome? And he looked at me and said, well, I told your dad to give you some money. I said, my father does not have the money to give me. And, that night I cried, because I really didn't know. Well, I guess I had realized that I simply could not go back.
Yeah.
When people say, what a difficult decision, I mean, I didn't have any difficult decision. I mean, it was the easiest in the world, because I was already making some money in the United States, and there was no money, no job, no future, no nothing in Italy. And so basically, what I did was, it was the first time I said, well, I guess I'm going to stay in the United States. And at the same time, you see, I was a clinician in Italy, and I will never give up completely my clinical activities.
Sure.
So I went to the chairman of pediatrics. I asked if he could, the chair of pediatrics asked the power, at least at the time, to actually let you sit for the boards. And he looked at me and he said, are you kidding me?
You seem to get that question a lot.
and then, in the Greek tragedies, there is the Deus ex machina. So when they cannot find a solution to the tragedy, there is something coming from above that decides it. And what happened there was that one of the senior residents, first of all, the American Board of Pediatrics, I had already published a couple of papers in JCI. I was doing pretty good research. So the American Board of Pediatrics sent me a letter saying that I could do the pediatric residency, finish it in 1 year. And almost at the same time, one of the senior residents at UCSF in pediatrics did something very, how can I say, very wrong during her call. And she had to be removed. And so now they had a position, a senior resident, and they didn't know what to put there, and they were short of senior residents. So they called me back and they said, you actually qualify because the American Board of Pediatrics wants only 1 year from you. The only problem I still had about a year of funding for my tobacco research grant. And so it was not easy to tell my research mentor that I was giving up 1 year of money. But, he actually didn't talk to me for a year.
Oh, my goodness.
And that was it. I started in January 1st. I'm probably one of the very few people that started residency January 1st and ended on December 31st.
Pretty unusual.
And it was one of the most tragic years of my life because, first of all, I was getting into a system that was completely different from the medical system in Europe. I had to learn all the names of the medicines from scratch. I mean, there was very little that we are doing in Italy that was the same in the United States at the clinical level. But more importantly, I didn't speak a word of clinical English.
Yeah.
And so many times they will just, in emergencies, they will just scream at me trying to get me to understand things. I couldn't understand it because I simply did not speak the language. And, but it was identical like when you get a little baby and you just grab them by one ankle and you throw him into the swimming pool. And what happens is that most of the times, actually, the baby starts swimming. And so after 2 or 3 months of this tragic life, I had to learn English. I had to learn the medicines. I had to learn how to be a pediatrician. And by the way, by the end of the year, I graduated with cum laude. I graduated with honors. So don't ask me how I did it, because still today, I do remember the nights on call in the NICU crying, but I made it. And
I don't even know how to tell you how amazing I find that.
But the amazing thing is it's all true. It's actually all true.
Yeah, that's not something you can just make up. Or would you make it up? I mean, it's just an incredible story.
And you cannot make it up.
And at no point did I hear you say, I had a lot of days when I just thought, I'm not going to get out of bed and go to work. I just can't do this anymore. You just kept
doing it. It was not an option. It was not an option. I mean, it was a very simple decision. It was not an option because when you don't have alternatives, decisions become extremely simple. And that's it. And then basically I graduated. So now I was a pediatrician. I got my boards. I got my license. And still they wouldn't give me a job at UCSF.
Right.
And so serendipitously, I went to do a course in bronchoscopy in Chapel Hill at University of North Carolina. And serendipitously, guess one of the instructors was one of the top pediatric pulmonologists in history. He was the director of pediatric pulmonology at Hadassah in Jerusalem. And Dr. Gottfried remembered me. He remembered that, at the time, bronchoscopies were quite experimental when I was in medical school. And one day, basically, he asked me to help him doing a rigid bronchoscopy. And for some reason, he remembered me. And he told the director of the program at UNC, give him a fellowship because you're not going to regret it. Something like that. He's a diamond, I think I said.
Uh-huh.
And guess what? They gave me, I remember, to get a position in that was the best program at the time, and to get a position was horrendously difficult. And they had to pick between me and actually a guy who had just graduated from Johns Hopkins. But because of the recommendation of Dr. Gottfried, they felt that to take this risk, and so that's the way I got into pediatric pulmonology fellowship, and I had to do only 2 years because again I had a lot of publications out. Already my CV was better than several of the attending physicians there. I worked like day and night as well. I managed to publish 16 papers while I was at UNC, despite that they put all the clinical rotations back to back, because again I was concentrating 3 years into 2, and that's it. And at the end I was a pediatric pulmonologist with all board certifications, with the license. Finally, for the first time in my life, I had all the right cards in my hands to start doing something funny.
Yeah.
So that's
and what really fascinates me about that is it appears to me that there were very few instances throughout that entire period, the decade or so, where you actually walked up to somebody and said, "I'd like to have a job." The jobs just appeared, and you stepped in and did what was asked of you.
There is no free lunch. What I tell to my trainees. What I tell to my trainees are, my first mentor in the United States was a guy called Jay Nadell. And Jay definitely was a defining figure in respiratory sciences for decades in the United States. He's also one of the authors of the best-selling textbook of pulmonary. He was an adult pulmonologist. It took me 6 months when I started at UCSF to actually come face to face with them. And this meeting was in the Xerox room. There was a little Xerox room in the Cardiovascular Research Institute. So again, serendipitously, I was there to pick up my mail. And he looked at me and he said, "Hey, Giovanni, how are you doing? I know that you are one of my fellows. And they tell me you're very smart." And at the time, I really thought I was smart. I didn't know better. I was very young. And he looked at me and he said, "Remember this." He said, "First of all, remember science is easy. Medicine is easy. People are difficult."
Pretty wise advice.
To date, I think in 2 seconds, he told me everything I needed to know about the future of my career, particularly as an executive.
Right.
No doubt in my mind. I mean, science and medicine are easy compared to what it takes to lead groups of humans and make them work together.
So much wisdom in that advice.
Right. And so, I had everything. It took a lot of time and work, but the other thing I learned, particularly from Jay, I have to say, the work ethics. The idea, which was the second thing that he told me, there is no free lunch. You're going to be a great scientist, but remember, it's going to be a lot of work. And it's absolutely true. I've never seen anybody, and I think I've been blessed to meet incredibly brilliant human beings. But if you don't match the brilliance with hard work, I don't think you're ever going to succeed. It's just the nature of it. It is possible that without the brilliance, you can work and still not be able to achieve what you want. But certainly there is no success without very hard work. And that, those are the 2 pieces of advice that I continue to give to my trainees. First of all, science is easy. People are difficult. So be careful, how you manage, your colleagues, your mentors, and so on and so forth. And second, forget that you're going to be successful without working, because anything that is relevant requires a lot of work.
That's good advice. Well, I want move us along a little bit here. You've given us a really good picture of how you developed clinically, but at some point you clearly developed an interest in leadership. Shortly thereafter, found your way into a position as a department head yourself, and I'm wondering where that interest came from. Did it just fall into your lap like all these other things? What was it like transitioning into a position from successful researcher, from successful clinician, into a position of department head and administrator?
So it's a natural evolution, because if you get into an academic career and that's what you like, the evolution has to be, it typically goes progressively into from being a physician scientist into being to take some administrative duties and evolve in that direction. Of course, there are other ways. You can. I'm unable to enjoy doing the same things for too long, and so I think I became an excellent clinician. I was quite successful as a scientist because NIH has been funding me for more than 25 years. At a certain point, I felt, I wanted to do something different. And by becoming an administrator, you in some way extend. I mean, by going from clinical to research, you go from going from a single patient to the ability of affecting many patients. And by going from research into administration, the process is similar, because if you run a hospital the right way, you're going to affect not one, not two, not 10, but you can affect the millions of people. And so to me, it was almost a natural evolution from a smaller circle into a larger circle, and then again a larger circle. And with the belief that I'm fundamentally believe in the fact that if you do something right, if you do something well, there is beauty into virtually anything that you do.
I see it as upgrading to a larger scale. But again, I'm totally convinced that if you do something and you do it right and you put all your enthusiasm and energies into something, it doesn't really matter what you do. It's how you do it.
So you didn't find the day-to-day details of administrative work confusing or challenging in any way? It was just one other thing to be learned and conquered? Is that what you're saying?
No, you just said it. I mean, it was challenging. I feel that I need to be challenged. At a certain point, it was too easy for me to take care of patients, and it was relatively easy to do research. And I was looking for something more challenging, and I found. I think it's, again, remember, medicine is easy. People are difficult, and that's why I think to be a good administrator is perhaps more challenging than anything else. To be a good leader is more challenging than anything else. And so, and by the way, I never gave up on the other elements because those are my addictions. I continue to see patients in clinic just one day a week, but I do. And I enjoy it very much. And I continue to do research personally and continue to be funded by NIH after 25 years. So I never gave up those parts of my being. It becomes more and more challenging, of course, but I guess the quick answer is in order for me, first of all, for me to do something right, I have to enjoy it, and in order for me to enjoy it, has to challenge me, has to be something that keeps my my interest alive, and that is challenging.
Do you think, and this is strictly an opinion question for you here, do you think that it is important, or do you think it would be advisable, a good idea for healthcare organization administrators on the whole to continue a connection with clinical practice? I have no doubt about it.
And by the way, when you look at the best organizations in the United States, healthcare organizations, one thing they have in common is they are run by clinicians. Frequently, they have to stop their career as clinicians at that time, but clearly they know. I mean, when you look at my former institutions, Cleveland Clinic, one of the characteristics of Cleveland Clinic that today is one of the top 2 or 3 hospitals in the world is that since it was created and similar to the Mayo Clinic, that is the best hospital in the United States right now, one of the distinctive element has been the leadership has always been made by physicians. Same thing with Geisinger, the same thing with most of the top institutions, and the most in the ones that are promoting innovation, the ones that are promoting excellence. Physicians know what is involved in providing care. And while I do know of many gifted administrators, I think that physicians turned administrators have something special because they know deeply how to provide excellent care. And so I'm.
Well, I have to admit, I was certainly hoping that is exactly what you would say. From a very personal perspective, I began my practice in 1980, and I practiced all total, including my residency years, 44 years. And early in my career, even the non-clinical hospital administrators looked to clinicians for advice on how to make decisions about things that were going to have a clinical effect. And gradually that has changed. And I think that's a really bad way for the system to go. And it sounds like you agree that we need more input from clinical people. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but I'm interested to hear what you think.
Completely. I mean, the best organizations in this country and around the world put patient first, not the bottom line. I mean, you cannot provide excellent care unless you put the patient first. Now, obviously, anybody who has been in administration knows that money is important, but it's the North Star has to always be the best interest of the patient. And, nobody better than a physician knows that is the case, that is the truth, and is naturally driven towards that. And so, and I think the best evidence for that is that most, and not only in the United States, when you look at truly the most advanced form of healthcare delivery systems around the world are led by clinicians. And I hope that this is going to become the norm. When it becomes excellence.
And isn't it interesting? And I mean, you made the point that the money is important. The dollars and the cents are clearly important. You can't operate if the revenues don't match with the expenditures. But isn't it interesting that the most some of the most financially successful healthcare institutions in this country are, in fact, led by physicians. And the ones that don't have any physician input are the ones that are struggling.
Yeah. And not only financially, but also in terms of excellence of healthcare delivery. I mean, again, and when you look, when you go to visit those places, most times you find and you read their mission statement, that there is something that relates to the fact that patient has to be first. And that is common across, because it's natural. I mean, you just cannot deliver top-of-the-line healthcare without putting the best interest of the patient first.
Well, you have certainly been a particularly effective example of that, what I believe to be a truth, and first at Miami, later at West Virginia, and then Case Western Reserve, and now at Tulane. You're in New Orleans. And by the way, how do you like life in New Orleans?
Well, I would have liked it much better without COVID, but
I bet you would. But it's given you an opportunity to write another grant, right? Aren't you all working on?
Yes, I am. But New Orleans is a very special city because it's almost uniquely trained to go through tragedies and devastation. I mean, I don't think that many cities would have survived Katrina. And when you live in New Orleans, you have a much better understanding of the devastation that this city, and yet resurrected like the phoenix. And that's why I think it's uniquely positioned to. I mean, we're going through tough times like the rest of the country, but in New Orleans, it's almost like, it's deja vu. I mean, people are so used to this, I guess, that make it, it's just another challenge. But yeah, it's a wonderful city. It's full of art. It's full of music. It's full of all the things. It's full of great food. So, and Tulane is a unique institution, has been, for almost 200 years, one of the top academic institutions in the country. And I really like it because of its diversity, because of its its global reach and interesting global problems.
It's very interesting. And I feel sort of foolish because I can't remember the name of the person who wrote the book, but he was a famous newscaster in this country. And when he wrote his autobiography, he pointed out that in his opinion, there were only 3 truly unique cities in the United States. And you have lived in 2 of those. He named New York, San Francisco, and New Orleans.
New Orleans, that's Tennessee Williams.
And but you've lived in 2 of the most unique cities in this country, and good for you. And it made a substantial impact everywhere you went. And
I visited New York a lot, so I've been. I'm a big fan of New York as well. Yeah.
I suspect if we both had the time, that we could probably continue this conversation for hours.
Yes.
But I don't know if anybody would keep listening that long. So, so what I'm going to do is go ahead and take us, Giovanni, to my favorite part of the program, and that's where you get to tell us your thoughts on what's a good way to become successful. So I'm going to close my mic and sit quietly, and Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte is going to give us his prescription for success. Giovanni, go ahead.
Well, I think a success is very dependent on the environment in which you operate. And so the first thing that I recommend my trainees to remember that they have this gift of being able to operate in a country that still is the best country in the world, which is the United States. And then after that, to operate and optimize the strengths of the United States. And that means freedom. if you want to be successful, it's absolutely critical that you maintain your freedom. There are many ways to lose your freedom, your intellectual freedom. But I think it's critical if you want to have long-term success, it's critical that you maintain your intellectual freedom. Another element that makes the United States different is the entrepreneurship and innovation. Never look at where the puck is, always look at where the puck will be. What has made the United States what they are today is the intrinsic drive to entrepreneurship and innovation of the people that built this country, and still today. There is no doubt in my mind that the United States are and will be for a long time the beacon of entrepreneurship and innovation. Diversity. I think one of the true strengths of the United States is diversity. The United States were built by people coming from other countries, people coming with dreams, people coming from places that didn't want them, and I am clearly an example of that. And I continue to believe that there are very few can be as patriotic as people that came into this country, because when you're born into this country, you kind of get used to the gifts that this country can give you, but the people who came from other places understand what they left behind and understand how important is the freedom, and all the other gifts that we get into this country. Diversity is critical. And if you want to lead a globally successful enterprise, you need to have global talent. And so it doesn't matter where people come from. What matters is the talent, the brilliance, the intelligence, the entrepreneurship that they bring with them. Mobility. Never stay still, never be complacent of your status. Life is short. It's good to have fun while it lasts. And I think that one of the beauties of this country, and still today, perhaps less than before, but still today, the American dream is important. The possibility that even if you start from nothing, like I started, one day you can make it big. And many people made it even bigger than me. And but the important thing is the possibility that you can make great things. And so those are the qualities: freedom, innovation, diversity, mobility. Those are the unique qualities of this country, and I'm pretty sure that if somebody understands what are the strengths of this country, is also going to be successful professionally in this country. And this is my prescription for success.
Well, that is very well stated, Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte. It has been an absolute pleasure to talk with you today. You got a great story, and I know that our audience is going to enjoy it. Before we go, I would like to give you an opportunity to tell our audience where they can find you, how they might be able to get in touch with you. I have a feeling that people would like to drop you an email or find you on some social medium. So if you would tell us where people can search, it would be helpful to all of us.
Well, my email is very simple. It's G as my first initial and Piedimonte. So gpiedimonte@tulane.edu. Very happy to receive emails. And also I keep my, I use LinkedIn primarily as a social medium to put my interviews, my materials, anything that I feel as is something that may be of interest to my audience.
Well, thank you very much for sharing that with us. And once again, Dr. Giovanni, sorry, my Italian is weak. Dr. Giovanni Piedimonte, it has been an absolute pleasure to have you share your life experience with us, and we thank you so much for being here.
Thank you, Randy. It has been an incredible pleasure talking with you. Thanks. So that will wrap up another episode of Prescription for Success. But before we go, I'd like to invite you to visit our website at rxforsuccesspodcast.com and join us as a subscriber. And while you're there, we'd really like to make you a part of the podcast. Just visit the website, click on the Contact Us button at the top of the home page, then scroll to the bottom, click on the big red Record button, and then go ahead and read us your personal prescription for success. If you stumble, like I do occasionally, don't worry. Just start over again, and we'll edit it to make you sound great. Also, while you're there, you can read about some other additional interesting facts about our guests that didn't make it into the recorded program. We look forward to hearing from you, and don't forget to fill your prescription for success with my next episode.